Good evening, America, and welcome to your Monday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you from Washington, D.C., where there's a few things going on today. Why? Well, over the weekend, former President Donald Trump predicted his own arrest could come as early as tomorrow. The investigation by Manhattan's District Attorney Alvin Bragg involves alleged hush money payments to an adult film actress named Stormy Daniels. It's a case federal prosecutors declined to bring years ago, and now Bragg's ties to liberal mega donor George Soros are coming under scrutiny. Joining us at the top of the hour is House Administration Committee Chairman Bryan Steil to discuss what Congress is doing to take a look at all that political theater going on in New York right now. But first, let's get up on the headlines with my amazing co-host Amanda Head, who joins us as always from Los Angeles. Amanda, what's going on in the world today?
Good evening, John, and as you indicated, no rest for the weary as we were all on top of the news this weekend, back in the saddle for another start to the weekend. Sticking to what you mentioned just a few moments ago, we'll be talking with Harvard's great law professor emeritus to break down a story you and your Just the News colleague Natalia Mittelstadt published earlier today, which revolves around a time period between Hillary Clinton and John Edwards that proves there has been a rich history actually, of political sex scandals with hush money that resulted in very few convictions. And I find it quite rich that the very district attorney who paraded through the media headlines last year bragging about downgrading felonies of known criminals to misdemeanors only for them to be let out and commit more crimes is the very individual trying to elevate or maybe even formulate this payment to Stormy Daniels into a crime committed directly by President Trump. And no matter what the far left DA outlines within the media or concocts in his office, our former president has also taken to True Social to state that there was, quote, no misdemeanor and no crime. Also joining us later in the hour is President Trump's campaign spokeswoman Liz Harrington, as well as Trump ally and 2022 Arizona GOP gubernatorial nominee Kari Lake. But John, I am tossing the reins back over to you for your additional comments on all of this, as well as bringing in our first guest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there was a lot going on today. Over the weekend, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy made clear that Congress is not happy with what's going on in New York. And today they escalated a little bit. Two committees joined in letters to demand that Alvin Bragg appear before Congress and answer questions. Again, this comes in the backdrop of an extraordinary investigation into the weaponization of law enforcement all across this country. And we are very lucky to have one of the gentlemen who signed that letter this morning, got the ball rolling. Joining us right now, the chairman of the House Administration Committee, Congressman Bryan Steil from the great state of Wisconsin. Mr. Chairman, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me on, John and Amanda.
I'd like to talk a little bit about this letter, what's behind it. I know a lot of concern that what's going on in New York has nothing to do with the law and a lot to do with politics. Tell us why Congress is getting involved.
I think everybody in the United States should be concerned about the radical weaponization of our judicial system by the left writ large. In this case in particular, I think we're asking the right questions. We're asking, was federal tax dollars being used in pursuit of this case? Was this politically motivated? I think those are two questions we need to know the answer to. In particular, at a period of time when we have liberal DAs like we have in Manhattan that are working on political cases rather than actually holding criminals accountable in some of our nation's largest cities.
Yeah, this letter had some incredible language in it. Do you think, first of all, have you heard any response from DA Alvin Bragg? Do you expect him to actually appear?
I have not heard back from him yet. Mind you, the letter was sent early this morning. We've given him until Thursday to come back to us with a reply. Hopefully sit down and answer a lot of questions that I think all Americans have. I think they're appropriate questions to ask at a period of time when you see such an unprecedented move by this DA. In particular, this is a case we got to remember that was not prosecuted by the DOJ, was not prosecuted by his office in the past. And then all of a sudden on the home stretch of the statute of limitations, looks like this district attorney is about ready to engage. I think we should ask the question, what changed? And what definitely appears to be the only thing that changed is that Donald Trump announced he's running for president of the United States. And so if this is a politically motivated use of our judicial system, if American tax dollars are being used, the American people deserve to know the answer to that.
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask a little bit about the state of crime prosecutions in our big cities. New York, one of those places where a lot of felonies are being downgraded to misdemeanors on serious offenses, violent offenses. Philadelphia, Los Angeles, we can name all the cities where the problems are. Republicans have promised to use the power of the purse. At some point, will cities like New York be told that their future federal funding is in jeopardy if they don't start enforcing laws?
We're going to be reviewing exactly how federal tax dollars are being used by prosecutors across the United States of America. It's one of the questions that I think we deserve answers to. Often the federal government is funding and providing resources to prosecutors across the United States. The purpose of that is to make our cities safer. And if we find out through this investigation that instead those are being used to weaponize DAs across the country with a purpose of grinding a political axe rather than making our communities safer, we're going to have to go back into the funding model. It's one of the reasons we're asking these questions. We continue to see DAs across the country engaged in political behavior. That sure looks like it's the case in this situation. What we want our DAs to do is actually go and work in the judicial system in an unpolitical way to actually hold criminals accountable and put guilty criminals behind bars.
Yeah, that's the way it used to work.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you see so many of these issues that are affecting the American people. Obviously, the economy, people are paranoid about this banking crisis that more than 100 other regional banks might fail. And it just seems like there's an amalgamation, a perfect storm as far as what's happening in this country. How do you think it is going to affect how you guys operate heading into next year and what will happen in the general election?
Well, I think we're going to see the Committee on Financial Services have a really strong hearing in the days ahead where we're going to be able to ask the tough questions about exactly what went wrong. Were the regulators asleep at the switch? Why did management have the assets they did on the balance sheet without having any hedging and protection against rising interest rates? But here's the gorilla in the room, Amanda, that I think we need to spend more time on. What's underlying this stress in the financial system is the direct result of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. Why are they raising interest rates? Because we have runaway inflation. And why do we have runaway inflation? The Biden administration over the past 2.5 years has put forward horrible policies that have driven inflation higher, from reckless spending to the war on energy to labor policies that allowed too many people to find themselves on the sidelines rather than getting back to work, to an overreaction to COVID, which resulted in supply chains getting all out of whack. How do we resolve this? We got to do the opposite. To bring inflation down, you pretty much have to do the opposite of what the Biden administration has been doing. You got to actually control spending. You got to help workers get back to work. You got to produce and unleash American energy, and we got to get our lives back to normal. If we do those key things, we can bring costs down, bring inflation down, and we could have prevented this catastrophe from happening in the first place.
Yeah, so important to get to the bottom of those answers, which we've been denied for a long time. Mr. Chairman, I want to stay on banking just for a second. Silicon Valley Bank obviously failed. A lot of its actions now being looked at, and obviously a big focus on the regulators, as you mentioned. This is a bank that also plunked a lot of money down in China. I think $100 million to get a development fund started in China. Is the Banking Committee going to dig into American banks and what they may have been doing in China the last few years, particularly as China's aggression against us becomes more and more obvious?
Silicon Valley Bank had a series of assets on their balance sheet that appear to have directly resulted in some of the challenges that they face. So I think there's going to be a lot of questions when we have the regulators before us about the actions that were being taken by the management at Silicon Valley Bank, but also what exactly was on their balance sheet. Were the regulators asleep at the switch? We don't have answers to all those questions yet, but the American people deserve to have those answers, and then we'll have to craft policies to make sure that this type of a situation doesn't happen again. That policy could very easily be making sure our regulators are engaged at banks. But big picture, writ large, we got to get inflation under control, because it's the inflation and the Fed's reaction to it that's causing all this stress in our financial system.
Yeah. Congressman Steil, while we're on the issue of SVB, I want to talk about a peripheral issue that a lot of people attribute to its ultimate failure, its possible demise. ESG. Congress sent a bill over to President Biden. He vetoed it. What's the future of ESG in America?
What a terrible move by President Biden today, in a bipartisan rejection of his administration's policies to actually allow your 401k, your retirement plan, to be based on risk and reward, to make sure that Americans' retirements are secure. Instead, the Biden administration doubled down on their commitment to try to hijack your retirement funds to advance their radical woke agenda. This should be concerning to all Americans. It's why there was such a significant bipartisan rejection of the Labor Department's policies. It's concerning that this policy is going to be able to remain in place due to the veto of President Biden, it's all the more reason that come in 2024, we need to have a conservative Republican president at the helm to protect people's retirement accounts.
Yeah, a lot of people worried about that and talking about that a lot more than ever before. Sir, you have your finger in a lot of important issues. One, you always champion our great military veterans. The VA is seeking reimbursement these days to have families pay back benefits that were paid to them when a loved one, a veteran, dies. Tell us a little bit about why you're intervening and why this is so upsetting to so many families.
We had a woman call us whose mother was receiving veteran survivor benefits. Her father lost his life in World War II. Her mother survived until just a year and a half ago. And then the VA came to her requesting the last month's payment of her veteran survivor benefits back. This, mind you, was after 1 day shy of the end of the month when all the bills were already paid. She came to me and said, Bryan, we got to solve this. And I assumed it was a hiccup at the VA. Lo and behold, it's actually a bad law that's on the books. And so I'm working to actually unwind this law so that what happened to her family never happens to a veteran's family in the United States of America again. These men and women who serve our country deserve our greatest respect. And in their final days, a family does not need a letter from the federal government demanding money back that's already been spent on behalf of caring for this veteran's family.
Yeah, so common sense.
My goodness, of all the wasteful government spending, and this is where they want to pinch pennies, it's unreal. I know that there's bipartisan support for this. You think it'll pass?
I'm optimistic. Sometimes you find these areas in the federal law where you just need somebody to carry the water to fix a problem. This was brought up to me by a woman in Franklin, Wisconsin, who came to me with this concern. We're getting to work. We're building support across the aisle. There's areas where we just can't let partisanship get in the way. And this is one of them where we have to make good on our promise to our veterans that we're going to take care of them because they served our country.
Yeah, so important. So we got about 20 seconds left. Just real quickly, do you expect we'll see a lot more of the videotape from January 6th? Will your committee make more of it available?
Yeah, we're continuing to make sure that we provide full disclosure to the American people. I think everybody was sick and tired of the partisan January 6th Select Committee picked and chosen by Nancy Pelosi. We're committed to actually providing transparency and also providing the security at our nation's capital to keep it open to the American people.
Yeah, that is a welcome change for sure. A lot of people talk about it. Mr. Chairman, great to have you on the show today. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, don't go anywhere. When we come back, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz has a lot to say about what Alvin Bragg's at. We'll have that right after the commercial.